Okay, Simone Weil, part two. Um, so let's review a little bit the context, right? Who she's responding to. Remember, we are in the post-Holocaust context. So this is, God is eclipsed, God is silent, right? There's a problem in terms of God not feeling present, right? We are dealing with the general theme of the absence of God, right? In the context of the post-Holocaust. So in this context, right, Simone Weil is going to address a problem which a lot of us struggle with, right? And all of us will struggle with at some point if we haven't done so already. And this is the issue of feeling God's presence or hearing God's voice, right? A lot of us, right, have tried, right? I read essays from students who tell me, I tried, I wanted to connect to God, but nothing, right? I would go, I would pray, I would do this, but I didn't feel any connection, right? I don't feel like there is any contact. Or some of us have never even felt it, right? We haven't even looked because we've never even felt it. We don't have the concept that it's possible, right? So this text is going to be written for those of us who are struggling with this issue of I try, I want to, but I don't feel a connection. I don't feel like, anything is happening. My heart remains dead, right? So this class is really going to address the issue of how can we connect, right, to the divine presence? What has to happen, right? So what we're going to learn is that for Simone Weil, it's not enough to just say, I don't hear God, right? Very often, according to her, and this is important, make sure you write this down, we don't hear God because we are not properly positioned, right? Let me write this in the chat, right? We don't hear God. Not because God is not speaking, right? So not because God is not there, but because, and this is her idea, right? We are not properly positioned to hear or connect to God. Okay, so I gave you the example when I introduced Simone Weil, right? The car radio, right? The dial. So sometimes you turn it and you're not yet at the radio station and there's this bzzz, right, parasite. And so this is where a lot of us are actually. We've turned the dial, but we're not yet at the radio station. So all we're hearing is confusion, questions. I don't get it. I don't feel anything. I feel confusion instead. I feel doubt. This is the dial not yet reaching, right? What she's going to teach us is what can we do to turn it so that it connects to the God frequency, right? She compares God to a radio frequency, right? It's always there, but we don't hear because we are not on the frequency of God, right? So make sure you write this down. This is a great analogy, right? Just like a frequency is always in the atmosphere, right? But we don't connect. Why? Because we are not aligned with the frequency. And so what this text is going to teach us today is how do we align ourselves so that we can begin to connect to this frequency, right? The frequency of God. Okay. Now, what we're going to see, and this is a kind of a transition into the love class that I will teach next semester, right? What we're going to see is that connecting to God is very similar to connecting to a human being, right? In as much as God in the Christian tradition is a person, right? Not a human being, but a being, right? So let me ask you this question, right? Suppose you want to find the love of your life, okay? So I'm going to test to see how good you guys, how smart you are about this. You want to find the love of your life. What is the best way to do about it? Doing everything you can, trying to control the situation, making a huge effort, going to every party, being on every website, right? Or that's one way. So striving to make it happen, or letting go and allowing it to happen. What would be the best way to get love into your life? What do you think? Okay, so Wilkes thinks let it come to you, rest or allow it to happen. Oh, we have some smart people. Who disagrees? Shamalov, letting go, allowing it to happen. Okay, not bad. Anybody disagrees? That no, you have to do this. You have to get up.
I disagree.
Okay, go ahead, Milgram.
I mean, I don't completely agree with the alternative of being crazy about it and always putting yourself in a situation. I think to a certain extent you have to let it happen, but I also think and like know of people who are of the philosophy that, oh, just like sit and wait. But if you're really not actively looking, like, one, people won't know that like you're out there and that you are looking. And two, like, I think in everything you have to like put in effort. Like, you can't just think that things are coming to you.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, so good. You guys are, what Simone Weil is going to talk about is a combination of the two. And this is what she means, we'll see later, by the Taoist notion of passive activity. It's not completely passive, but it's not completely active either. So you guys are both, it's a mixture of both, right? I think I agree with Wilkes and who else? Respler, Shamalov, right? It's a letting go, but it's not just sitting at home eating potato chips in front of Netflix, right? This is not letting go, right? There is something you still, there is an initiative, but how, what is the difference between doing and striving, right? So we'll see today, right? How it is actually a combination of the two, right? There is a letting go, but there is also a type of action that needs to happen. The action, which is also a letting go. Okay, let's see what Alim says. Okay, good. So yes, Alim, I'm going in that direction too, right? To be yourself, go to the places you really enjoy, right? And then the right person comes. So there's a positioning. Notice what Alim is saying. Go to certain places, you position yourself, but then what? Do you go around with your business card, try? No, you allow it, right? So this is really, I think, Alim, you got the synthesis, right, between positioning yourself, so doing, but at the same time positioning yourself in order to receive. So guys, this is the best love advice I could give you today. This is a snapshot into next semester. If you want love to happen, go, but then receive, right? So you put yourself in the right place, but at the same time you have to allow it to come at that point, right? Okay, so this is exactly what Simone Weil is going to talk about. She's going to distinguish between two concepts, the will versus attention. Okay, these are the two concepts I'm going to talk about right now. So the first thing she's going to say is that the connection to God is not an act of the will. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why is it that you can't just will it to happen? I want God to reveal himself to me. Come on, God, right? Come on. And you get frustrated and angry and bitter when he doesn't reveal himself at the right time, in the right moment, in the right way, right? This is the will, right? So let me say it again, right? An act of the will is ultimately you call the shots. The one who is willful in seeking God is the person who says, well, I'd like God to reveal themselves in the next 24 hours. And if God doesn't, then I'm done, right? Or I think God should reveal himself like this and not like that. And I think God should be this and not that. And because I think God is this, I'm done, right? So she's saying first thing we need to discard to position ourselves is this willfulness. In other words, this desire, let me write this down, right? The will is simply the desire to control how the experience will take place, to control who God is, how he reveals himself, or how he ought to reveal himself, right? When, etc., right? This is the person who wants to call the shots. Wilkes, you have a question. Go ahead.
No, I didn't have a question. I just had a comment of how, like, you need to give God the space to enter in his own way. Like the same way when you're looking for a relationship, you can't be like, oh, I want to find a tall person with brown eyes, brown hair. Like, you need to like wait and see what life gives you. You know what I mean?
Okay, very good, right? The will is like, well, I like the way you compare it to romantic relationship, right? This is the person who is willful in seeking God is the person who is willful when they seek a relationship. Oh, I want him to be like this, like that, and he should have this, be this tall, have this color eyes, make this amount of money, have this type of car, and then we're in business, right? So the will wants to control how, when, who, right? And Simone Weil is saying you cannot control the divine encounter. You cannot decide when, how, and who God will choose to reveal himself as, right? So in other words, so the first thing, right, that we have to do is shed the will. And so this implies what? Practically it implies you don't get to decide when or how or who God chooses to reveal himself as, right? And this is important because very often God might reveal himself to us, but we were expecting him to be like this. And so we miss the encounter, right? It's the same with a potential romantic relationship. We're looking for this. Great guy comes, great woman comes. We don't see them. We're busy looking for this, right? So that's the first thing one has to do, is relinquish this type of controlling attitude. That's what she means by the will. Now, she doesn't mean to do nothing, but she means to do. We'll talk about this in a second. She means to doing is not controlling. We're going to talk about this, right? So that's the first thing. Any questions on this first shift you have to make in order to begin the alignment? Any questions on that, or confusions or disagreements? We good? Okay. Now, against the will, she says we actually, the right attitude is to develop the power of attention. Okay, so now what is attention, right? Does anybody know? Can anyone tell me what is attention? To be attentive. What does it mean? What does it imply? Is it a doing to be attentive or not? And how would you do this in the spiritual journey? Okay, Williams, what do you mean?
Like, be more into details rather than the overall picture, and don't look exactly what is there. Look at something deeper, meaning read between the lines.
Oh, so how would you apply it to the encounter with God concretely? Give me an example of how you would read between the lines.
Just like with the job, how God was more abstract with it. He said, look at all the trees, look at the nature, look more deep into that. Don't look specifically at me, look at everything around me.
Okay, very good, right? So attention means you are really open, and you're able to look more deeply than the surface of things, right? Surface of things says something. Attention goes deeper. I like that. That's very nice. Very good. What else? How else could we define attention or attentiveness? Are you doing something when you're paying attention? What are you doing exactly? What is the definition of attention? What are you doing? Respler, elaborate a little bit for us.
I think that when you say like attention, it's just kind of like having an awareness of everything that's going on around you. So it's kind of being aware of like how, if God is revealing himself, or like signs that he could be, or kind of like if it's not going to be like in the most outright way, maybe just like signs of like ways that he is revealing himself, and like, but not like in the outward way that like you may have expected.
Okay, very good, right? First thing, attention is an awareness of the outside. You're not stuck in your mind with your representations, with your idea how things should go. You're looking, you're watching. You are, like some of you are saying, open, receptive, like Critchell is saying, alert, right? Wilkes, letting go of distractions, right? So it's a completely, so it is an action, right? You're looking, you're paying attention, but it's an action which is an action of, let's see what's going to happen. You're more open-ended, right? You're open-ended, you're receptive, you don't know what will happen, you don't have control, but you're ready, right? Okay, so let's write some of this down. So we saw what is the will. Now attention is a kind of receptivity, alertness, you're open-ended, no control, right? Waiting. Okay, so this is similar, right? In a romantic relationship, you go to the right place, like Alim said, you do a few things, right? But at the same time, you're also open to what is going to be beckoning to you from the outside, right? You're receptive to what is going to be inviting you. So it's not you're going there with a fixed agenda. So here's the difference, right? Let's imagine the following scenario. You're going to a party and you want to meet the love of your life, okay? There's two ways to do it. And this is this, then we'll transpose it to God, right? First way, you have an agenda. He needs to be like this, like that, like this, and we need to meet like this, and he needs to act like that. And then the next day he has to call me exactly 24 hours after the initial encounter. We have to kiss, but not like this, only like that. And then, 48 hours, we need to be having dinner, right? Agenda. Some of us seriously do this, right? And so then when it doesn't fit with the agenda, we get tempted to be like, this isn't it, right? So the other person, right, the attentive person, so that's the willful person. Attentive person goes to the party and is like, all right, let's see what happens. Let's see what comes my way. Let's see who comes and speaks to me. And then let me just go with the flow and see what they invite me to do. And then I will perhaps do it or not. We'll see. Do you see the difference? Put your hand in the screen if you're following me, right? It's exactly the same when it comes to God. It's like going to a party. You're going to the party. You want to know, you want to encounter. So there's still the initial desire, but then your attitude is not, it's got to be like this and like that. It's open-ended, receptive, attentive to whatever comes your way, right? So let me give you an example. I have an example from, actually, this is a very typical example, right? A lot of us abandon or reject the notion of God because God is not acting like we think he should act, right? For example, you go through a very painful moment of your life, right? We've been talking about pain a lot, right? And now you're thinking, how could God do this to me, right? And in a way, when you do that, you're saying, no, this is not the type of God I want in my life. This type of God, giving me this challenge, right? And so you push it away, missing the encounter that could take place from within your suffering, right? So very often we get experiences that we refuse or we reject because, and we feel like, no, this is not the type of God I want to be engaged with. And we miss the possible encounter we could have within that experience, right? Or you could have the idea of someone, right? Suppose you're from a certain religion or background and you get invited to explore a different religion and you sense, kind of a pull towards that faith, but then you're thinking, no, God can't be there, right? And so forth. Or the opposite. You feel like your religion has disgusted you so much, the tradition of your parents, it's so disgusting to you that you feel, no, never, God could never be there. I could not. And so you limit yourself, right? You limit the possibilities of encounter, right? You have a rigid idea, no, God cannot be from within Judaism, or God cannot possibly be found from within Christianity, or I can't possibly, right, accept a God who causes suffering. So we think, right? And so in doing so, we are setting rigid criteria, we are willful, and we are missing a possible encounter. Just like the person who's like, I want him to be 5 or 6 feet something, make this amount of money, and missing the right person, right? So, so that's what she's saying, right? Let's not fall into the temptation of the will and allow ourselves, right? God will come in weird moments, in shocking ways sometimes, right? Sometimes we will have a revelation of God in a completely heretical context, right? Sometimes we will have revelation of God in the middle of sin, right? Sometimes we'll have revelation of God in the middle of suffering or in the middle of joy. And we need to be in a way, right? God will encounter us where he chooses to encounter us. And we need to be open, she says, to whatever situation or experience God chooses to encounter, right? To be the place of encounter, right? Okay, are we clear on these two distinctions? Let's read the quote really quick. Now that I've explained it. Page 126. Third paragraph, the effort. Are you there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. So now just basically saying what I've just explained, right? The effort that brings a soul to salvation is like the effort of looking or of listening, right? It is the kind of effort by which a fiancé accepts her lover, right? So here she's taking a very old-fashioned stance, right? For some of us, that the woman is the one who is supposed to be waiting. And the man is the one supposed to be initiating, right? She's saying, in that way we ought to be, right? Waiting for the initiation. It is an act of attention and consent, whereas what language designates as will is something suggestive of muscular effort, right? Will is effort. You want it to happen like this, and if it doesn't, right? Or you want it to happen now, or you want it to happen in this way, and you're wanting to force the encounter, right? That's the will. She says why the will doesn't work. This is why. Because the will, I'm continuing, is on the level of the natural part of the soul. Natural means the low, instinctive, animal part of the soul. The right use of the will is a condition of salvation. So you should decide, you can decide, but it's remote, inferior, subordinate, negative, right? And now she gives an example. The weeds are pulled up by the muscular effort of the peasant, but only the sun and the water can make the corn grow. So ultimately, the encounter with God is not something we can control. We can only position ourselves for it. We cannot make it happen. Same with love. You can only position yourself for it. You cannot make it happen. You cannot force that cute guy, in the party to date you, right? You can just maybe walk over there, and, kind of like stand next to him, but you can't force him to pay attention to you, right? It's the same. Okay, so now I want to go into, just to go deeper, right? She's now going to quote the works of Lao Tzu, which I mentioned, right? Which is the Tao, okay, my spell check is fixing it, which is the Tao Te Ching, right? We're now going to go and do a little detour through Chinese philosophy, right? Remember, she's here agreeing with Maimonides that sometimes we have to take an exit, go and explore something else to better understand one's own faith, right? So here, she's going to take a little detour through Chinese philosophy in order to better understand her own Christian experience, right? So let's see a little bit what she says. This is the 5th paragraph on 126. This kind of passive activity, are you there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. So she's now commenting on attention, right? Going deeper. What does it mean to position yourself in the right way? Is it purely passive, like Milgram was complaining, or is there something that I'm doing? So she says this kind of passive activity, okay, this is the key, passive activity. The highest of all is perfectly described in the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu text, and in Lao Tzu, who is the author of the Tao Te Ching, right? And so I want to stop a little bit on that, and I want to ask you if you've done your homework and figured out what is this passive activity. Let me hear from you. And from there, we're going to build what it means, right, to position ourselves. So who did the research? And please share with us what you found. Wilkes, go ahead. I see you were reading the book, so go ahead.
Yeah, so basically passive activity, or like Wu Wei, as we talked about before, it's like non-doing. So it's letting go of control and also giving space to the universe to happen and for life to happen on its own without our own interference. And that interference would be our control.
Very good. I wrote it down. Okay, everybody write this down. I put it in the chat. Wu Wei, which is the Chinese. I hope it's the right word. Passive activity. Where are my Chinese? Let me look. Where are my Chinese students? Wu Wei, how would you translate it? Mei, Honglin, Li. Wu Wei, have you come across this concept before? No? Li, Chen, both Chens. Let's see. Okay. Yes, we need our Chinese students to agree with us. Are we reading this correctly? Okay, Critchell. Oh, your mom uses it. Hello, Bella. Tell us how your mom uses it. This is interesting.
Oh, just whenever I'm like not doing anything or like spacing out, she's like, she like uses it. Because I think for her, everything's about action, action, action.
Very Good. So the Chinese have forgotten the ancient art of Wu Wei, it would seem, since your mother, right, is not like you, right? First generation American. She's Chinese, right? What are you doing sitting around doing nothing? Wu Wei. Absolutely, right? So this is actually an ancient art, right? Wu Wei is coming from a traditional text, which in China, as you can see from our wonderful Chinese students, is not being circulated enough, right? So so Wilkes is right? It is a kind of effortless action, a non-doing. Make sure you write this down. Letting go of control. And when you let go of control, you give the space for the universe to happen. Good. So this is one good way to define it. There's more though. Anybody else come up with something else for passive activity or Wu Wei? Or is it only Wilkes who did the homework? Don't disappoint me on the last day of class. Okay. All right, let me add while you're thinking. So first thing, right? I'm going to write it down. Wu Wei, or passive activities, relinquish control. Definitely. Number 2. So there's 2 other ways to see it. Another way to define passive activity is acting. So there's an activity, right, without a goal. So I'm going to talk about this. And then the third way we're going to talk about is acting in response to the environment. Okay, so these are 3 ways that I've come across that characterizes Wu Wei. So actually, I would put Wilkes, what she says about relinquishing control, in the acting without a goal. So let me redo this. Acting without a goal, we'll see that's actually relinquishing control, and B, acting in response to the environment. So just 2 points, okay? Sorry, guys. So you got this, just 2 points, right? A, acting without a goal. That's one way to understand Wu Wei. Number 2, B, acting in response to the environment, right? Notice I'm saying this for Milgram, who's probably feeling nervous right now. It's an acting in both cases. You're acting, right? But you're acting in a certain way. This is key, right? So you're doing something, but you're doing it in a certain way, which is passive, right? And this is what makes it both active and passive. And Simone Weil says, once we have understood this concept of Wu Wei, we will know how to position ourselves perfectly, right, for this encounter with the divine. So let's look at the first one, right? A, acting without a goal. Anybody want to give a wild guess what that means or have an idea or no? So Restler, yes, in our Western mind, right, when we hear acting without a goal, for us it's negative. It's like, oh, you're just being impulsive and reckless and chaotic, but this is not it. So that's a very good example, guys, right? How Restler responded, how the Western mind is so unaccustomed, right, to thinking about this, to thinking in this way, right? We think, if I don't have a goal, then what's the point, right? So that's not it. That's not it. Wilkes, going with the flow, almost. I think that's more the second one, acting in response to the environment. What does it mean that you act without a goal? So in other words, suppose you want to get a good grade for your test, right? The Tao Te Ching would tell you, best way to get a good grade is to study without a goal. What does that mean? That's the best way. Yes, you got it, Alim. Tell us, explain to us out loud.
So like, say that you're like applying to college, so you like try your best with all like the essays, like all the application stuff, but you don't like get attached to one like school, and you just like let the right school come to you.
Very good, right? This is exactly it. By the way, everything I say for God works for relationships too, right? So you can take little notes in the margins, right? Acting without a goal is doing your best and then allowing what will happen to happen, right? You don't have a fixed, rigid expectation of the outcome. You do your best, you position yourself, you go to that party, you dress up nice, you spray perfume, you're ready, right? But at the moment you enter the party, you relax. You relinquish control on whatever the outcome will be. You don't prescribe the outcome. You just do what you can and then you release, right? Same thing for love, same thing for God. You want to encounter God? Do everything you can. But then at the moment that you've done your best, you've studied, you've read books, you've gone to different, temples, you're trying to do this, you're meditating, right? You're trying all kinds of things, but you're doing it in a relaxed way. You're not doing it with like, it's gotta happen, right? You're doing it, you're trying a bunch of stuff, but you're relaxed and you know that ultimately the encounter is a grace. It's not in your hands, right? Let's remember this. So let me write this down. You do your best, everything you can, but ultimately, right, you relax knowing that ultimately the encounter is a grace. It's a gift, right? You're not in control of the outcome, what happens at that party, right? You can do your best, come dress up nice perfume, makeup for girls, right? Or guys, if you're into that, right? Go there, smile, be nice, have a nice conversation, but don't try. You cannot control what's going to happen. You're open to whatever comes your way. That's the first way to act without acting. Milgram, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think that's like, it's not surprising to me that like I would agree, because that's not like the extreme. Like you said at the beginning, like she has more of a middle ground. So like I think that's what I'm most likely to agree with. It's the extreme in the direction of like doing absolutely nothing that I disagree with, but like you're saying, like dress up a certain way, put on the perfume and whatever, knowing that you're not necessarily going to find the person and that you can't micromanage everything, I think is like the healthiest way to look at it. Like I agree.
Yeah, very good. Respler, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. She grew up Jewish, right?
She's Jewish ethnically, but she didn't have they were agnostic, completely.
Okay. But it's just so funny because I feel like that's like a very well-known Jewish concept of like the balance of like belief and like practical like application and like doing your own like work, but like also having belief that it works, which is like a fundamental like Jewish belief. So I'm curious if that was like implemented even if they were a little bit agnostic, as it's like such a central belief that kind of could have been implemented into like her thought process, like just not even from the sense of God.
Yeah, I mean, it could have come from many directions, right? If she's also a Christian, obviously Christianity comes from Judaism, so there are connections there. Or it could be simply that, she says this, that every religion meets at the bottom of, right? Ultimately, when you dig a little bit, you find that they all have a common truth. So maybe she stumbled on a Jewish truth in the Chinese text, because ultimately for her, all religions, when you dig enough, agree, right? Of course, Judaism can be transmitted through the genes, right? You don't need to go to synagogue to have a certain mindset. I agree with you on that. So I'm not sure, right? But certainly, right? I mean, we know, for example, somebody like Marx, right? Karl Marx, who was complete atheist, but who came from a long tradition of rabbis. When he writes the Capital, right, his text is one of the most profoundly Jewish texts you can find, right, even though he didn't have a fiber of religiosity, right? So I agree with you on that. It could be, yes, Respler, absolutely. Good. All right. So everyone clear on the first point. You know now how to date, and you know how to align yourselves, right, to the divine. Now, the second point that I mentioned was how did I put it? B was acting in response to your environment. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, I'm spelling it wrong each time because I'm in a hurry. Okay, acting in response. So now what does this mean, right? What would be this kind of action where you act in response to your environment? What would that look like at the party, for instance? What would that look like in your spiritual journey? Give me some examples. Really? Okay. Wrestler, tell us a little bit.
I think what like kind of jumped out to me in that concept is the kind of like the ability to be like adaptable, in that like as kind of the environment's constantly changing, like the world's constantly changing, and like you can't really like make a perfect situation like we were talking about before in your head, because like that's not going to happen. So kind of like rolling with the punches, and like as like reality doesn't necessarily meet expectation, kind of rolling with that.
Very good, right? So the ability to be flexible, both in love and in the spiritual journey, is fundamental, right? You position yourself, but then you're able to go where the signs lead you, right? So someone smiles at you from the other end of the room. Okay, let me see. Let me explore this. Let me smile back, right? They come up. Okay, I'm talking. They invite me. Okay, I'm going, right? In the context of spiritual journey is the same, right? You are now ready to meet God. Here you are, you have positioned yourself, and now out of the blue, your grandmother tells you that she found this old Jewish book that she would like you to read, and you're trying to get rid of Judaism, right? And now you're like, oh man. So what Simone Weil would be like, something just opened up, go with it, even though it feels a little bit odd, and you're like, oh no, I don't want to go back to that. You still, right, you take a step wherever. So you are attentive to outside of yourself, whatever signs, whatever invitations, whatever is opening up, you don't resist, right? You're able to receive the invitation, the signs, and so forth. This is acting in response to your environment. You're not acting according to your agenda. You're open. Someone smiles at you, you smile back. Someone invites you to a weird Bible study, you go, right? Even though you feel odd, right? Or your grandmother gives you, a sacred object, and you're like, I'm not a Catholic anymore. Why are you giving me this? You take it. You don't know, right? That would be the first way, right? To act in accordance to your environment. Follow the signs. Wilkes, sorry, I spoke a lot. Go ahead, Wilkes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same exact thing, like with the example of the party. Let's say you're going to a party and you had like a really bad day. Oh, I spilled my coffee, I failed my test, whatever. But if you go to the party and you're so in your head and you're standing by the wall or sitting on a couch, not really engaging with others, you're very closed off, and you won't allow yourself to make new friends or find new people or even find that partner if you're resistant to you having a better day, even though you had a bad day in the morning. You know what I mean?
Yes, very good. Absolutely, right? And it's the same in the spiritual journey, right? What Simone Weil is saying is be open to trying out things you wouldn't try out. Be open to go places you wouldn't go. Be open to reading things you wouldn't read, right? Encountering people you wouldn't encounter. Follow the signs, right? And she's saying, once you learn to do these two things, right? Number one, doing your best and then waiting. And number two, when something comes along, following. So there's two things, right? Three. Three things you have to do to position yourself accurately. Number one, get rid of your control. Get rid of the will. Get rid of your narrow expectations, how, when, who, right? Number two, position yourself, right? Number three, follow the signs. That's passive activity. Okay, so let me write it down. Number one, relinquish control and expectations, right? How things should go. When, how, who, right? Number two, position yourself, right? Do your best. Show up, right? Study, explore, whatever, right? Number three, follow the signs, invitations, even if they take you out of your comfort zone, right? These are the three things that you have to be willing to do to get to the God frequency, right? If you're not able to do that, you'll always be in the parasite section, right? Okay, so let's look a little bit at the text where she says these things. Let me see how much time I have. 8 minutes, great. Quick then. Go to page 127. There's a nice paragraph. The second paragraph, there are people. Put your hand in the screen if you have it. Okay. So we'll read that. So this is all commenting on the right positioning, right? Which we just talked about. There are people who try to raise their souls, right? They want to make it happen. They're forceful. They have effort. Page 127, second paragraph. In the hope that if he jumps higher every day, a time may come when he will no longer fall back, but will go right up to the sky. Thus occupied, he cannot look at the sky. So you're so busy trying to make it happen, you lose the ability to see the signs, right? It is not enough. We cannot take a single step toward heaven. In other words, she's saying we can't make it happen. We cannot make the encounter with God happen, just like we cannot make the encounter with our romantic partner happen. We can position only, right? It is not in our power to travel in a vertical direction. If, however, we look heavenward for a long time, if we are positioned, waiting, open, God comes and takes us up. We receive the grace of the encounter, right? He raises us easily. It's easy, effortless. As Esquila says, there is no effort in what is divine. And I would say the same. There is no effort in when it comes to love or encounter. As if you're positioned, it will come, right? Effortlessly. If you're striving, it's going to be a struggle because you're going to be constantly blocking it with your striving, right? So that's the idea. Now, there's one last point that has to do with the notion of waiting, right? Now, coming back to Christianity, right? The notion of waiting. I want to go to page 128. Second paragraph, the attitude. Are you there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. All right. So she says this, right? This is the concluding remarks. The attitude that brings about salvation, right? Or the attitude that brings about the encounter is not like any form of activity, at least willful, right? The Greek word which expresses it is upomene, and paciencia is rather an inadequate translation of it. Paciencia, you recognize the word patience, right? It is the waiting or attentive and faithful immobility that lasts indefinitely and cannot be shaken, right? So here she's talking about the nature of your positioning, right? She's saying, first of all, it's not an activity, it's not something you can make happen. You position yourself, you're open, you're receptive, and this is the key. You do not set the timeline. That's what it means to wait. I'm receptive, and I have an open-ended timeline. Likewise in love, by the way, right? If you come with a timeline, yo, it's been 6 months, like, what's going on? No, right? You come, you wait, you're open, you follow the signs, you enter through the doors that open, you accept the invitations, but you do not have a timeline. After 6 months, this should be happening, right? The word here is indefinitely. Let me write this down. In other words, you're willing for it to take the time that it will take. And this is the issue with most of us. After a few years of trying things out and not getting answers, we give up. Or even after a few months, right? We give up when if we had continued a little bit more, we might have had an amazing encounter, right? Some of us have already given up, right? You're 17 years old and you're already done, right? Not much waiting there, right? So this is the idea, is that let us not, what she's asking us to do is let us not give up too soon and miss the experience. This is the same for love, by the way. Let us not give up too soon, right? And miss the experience. So that's the idea. Too many of us, right, when things don't go fast enough or are exciting enough, we want to just, or happen the way we want them to happen, right? We give up, right? And what Simone Weil is saying is that this kind of positioning takes a rare courage and audacity and guts to sit there and wait, no matter how long it's going to take. I'm going to be sitting there and waiting till I die. And if I die and nothing happened, then I can give up, right? You don't give up until you're on your deathbed. Right? So, and this is the key, because if you don't have this patience, you will not have the grit to really go through the journey that it will take to have that kind of encounter, right? The encounter with the divine is not candy, right? it takes a certain amount of experiences. It takes a certain amount of grit, of courage, of perseverance, right? Before you can have that encounter. It's not bestowed like, it's not cheap in a sense, right? So we have to have the audacity and the courage, and especially the perseverance, and the same goes for love, right? To really have that journey. You will never have a spiritual journey if you're not capable of holding on when there is no reason to. And it's the same, you will never have a love journey if you're not capable of holding on when there's no reason to, right? This is the last important aspect of alignment, right? So I'm putting number 4, right? And number 3, I saw the spell check changed it to sings. Follow the signs, right? Number 4, persevere. Do not give up. The word is indefinitely. And this is where most of us fail, not only in the spiritual journey, but in our romantic relationships, right? We give up too soon. We are not able to go through with the whole journey, right? And we miss the ultimate encounter when we're not able to push through. Okay, any questions or comments or disagreements? Good. All right. So, 6, you have a review on Thursday. The rest of you, I hope to see you again in the spring. If any of my classes are full, you can always contact me also in the future, and I'll let you in, right? No problem. I wish you great vacation in spite of COVID. It's very boring right now, the vacations, the type of vacation we can take. Right? 10 people maximum, right, in the house. It's not bad. Yeah, so I wish you all the best. Hope to see you again. And you have your test, which is due, of course, this weekend normally. But you have until December 18th to hand in everything else. So you guys are free to go. I'm going to turn off the recording.